Welcome to Voices from the Field podcast presented by Extra Innings Softball, where the stories are real, the conversations are honest, and the game goes way beyond the field. We're bringing you insight, inspiration, and all things softball from the people shaping the sport.
Welcome back to another episode of Voices from the Field with Extra Innings Softball. There's really no need for me to introduce this legend of the game, specifically someone I've known for probably almost as long as he's been coaching in softball. Right. I played against him when we called it Fresno State. Now it's called Cal State University of Fresno. It will always be Fresno State for me when he was at Arizona. Probably my biggest memory of playing as a player against this legend of a coach, Mike Candrea from Arizona, is at the Pony Tournament. And you probably don't know it, but it still stings my heart the most. I think the time that you beat us as I was pitching, and I think I pitched a 3-hitter, and I don't think one of them got more than 4 feet from home plate, and we lost 1-0, and I just questioned life and everything I was doing. I was like, that can't even be possible. If you know anything about the game of softball, I would consider him a legend in the transformation of what offense is within the game. Very innovative back in the days of Larry Ray with the slapper, all of the different things going on. Then he went to pure power with, I believe it was Laura Espinosa, and like 38 home runs from when it went white to yellow and all that different stuff. So I welcome Mike Candrea from the University of Arizona. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I want to kind of take you just through a little bit of things, because if people don't know, he's won 8 NCAA titles, if I didn't miss one. He's won a USA gold medal with the Olympic team. He's been an interim AD. He's an advisor to the AD now. So he's someone that is sat in all areas of the game from the coaching level. So I think this is a great time to really kind of talk about the evolution of the game. What do you think, or what have you seen as what you think are the biggest changes within our game of softball, Mike?
Wow, there's so many changes. I mean, the talent pool's gotten bigger, which is a good thing. I think we've always looked for trying to have some parity around the country, and we definitely have that because the game has grown. And so there's a lot of young kids that are playing the game at a high level. Therefore, there's a lot more competition for those scholarships that we're talking about. And the whole climate's changed right now. I look back, I retired in 2021. And in 2021, I could honestly say that the game was pretty simple back then. We were still playing for the university and playing for a scholarship. And I think right now the game's completely changed. It's the Wild Wild West in my eyes. Yes. There really aren't. There's no parameters to what we're looking at and how to go about it. And I can't say I like it all, but I know that it has changed, and we're going to have to move forward and deal with it because it is what it is. I hate that term, but it's.
Yes, absolutely. I think in a podcast I did with Sue Inquist a month or so ago, I think she said it best when I heard her say, look, we're in a renaissance of all college sports. She goes specifically out of our game. And she says, in a renaissance, there's lots of change. And she says, and most renaissance start with the tail wagging the dog and not the dog wagging the tail.
Exactly.
When she said that, I was like, specifically when I'm sitting at my parents' ranch doing this today, I was like, boy, ain't that the truth? Because I had cattle running everywhere. We had it all going on. So I was like, this is what it's got to feel like to coach in it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
My question to you is I think one of the biggest things that had originally transformed the game was the rise of technology. Mm-hmm. There was so much technology out there. I'm really glad it wasn't around when I was pitching, because I would have had to pay attention much more to how I was tipping pitches or what I was doing, or just somebody being able to download it into an algorithm so your Arizona hitters could face me 250 times before we ever played. Mm-hmm. So I think that was it. But what do you think has been the biggest change of the game since you started to now? Is it technology? Is it the NIL? Is it portal? I'm probably a combination of all that, but what do you think is the biggest change?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of everything. I think the technology piece has been a good thing. We kind of follow MLB, and MLB, analytics. I look at watch the Yankees play, and I'm going, why is the second baseman playing so far up the middle? And then the ground balls hit right where he should be, but it's unfortunate because it's not the manager that's making the decisions. It's the analytical people that are doing it.
Yeah.
I look at softball right now, and there's only one piece of it that I have a hard time putting my arms around it. And it's not NIL. It's probably the way NIL has been used more than anything. And it really is a transfer portal, because I think what we've allowed is it's the Wild Wild West. And I don't mind kids transferring, but I think we're at a point now where there's so much money out there that there should be a fee when you transfer. You know, University A should be getting something for all the resources they put into this kid. If they want to transfer, great, but there should be some money handed over for that.
Absolutely.
And then I would feel pretty good about it.
Yes, absolutely. You know, it's funny you said that, because on another podcast, that's what I had said to somebody. I said, well, let me just say, like, I think it's a business now, 100% business and business only. In businesses, when there are contracts signed, there are escape clauses and things that you have to do. If I decide I'm going to buy Mike Candrea's house and I have to put a $10,000 deposit down, if I walk away with not honoring my good faith, he keeps my 10,000.
Right.
You know, I'm willing to do that if I don't want to go, and he benefits at least something for his time and energy put into it. I love that thought process. And you know, the thing about it is that I think I want to see, everyone said, well, yeah, that's a good idea. You know, so if whatever it costs to go to that school for that year should be the penalty of a kid leaving if they're being recruited by another school to go. And I said, well, I don't know what it is, but I almost feel, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, that it needs to be applied to the student athlete, because then the student athlete has some real decisions to make. Is this worth it? And in their negotiations is you're going to have to pick up that fee to University B that I'm going to.
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, it reminds me a lot of where I've quit watching Major League Baseball, because I used to love watching teams that I was bought into. And then I can very, very specifically remember when I gave up on teams, because I was an LA Dodgers person, being from California, which isn't really always a good thing, but you know, Tommy Lasorda days, all those good stuff. But then when they just started moving around, much like the portal, like what you're saying, because it came down to money, I became a Pudge Rodriguez fan. Like I wasn't a Texas Rangers fan, but I was all in on Pudge, because he started as a bat boy. He did everything there. When he actually left, I was like, yeah, peace, I'm done. Like, I just can't follow. I'm not going to spend the money or my time in something that I felt like there was no loyalty in, you know? So I definitely hear you. So I was going to ask you, if you were across all college athletics for the day, what would be your number one change? But I think we just kind of covered that in that process.
Yeah, I just think there's got to be some parameters that are there's got to be a set of rules that we're playing with. And, you know, up until right now, we don't even know what the rules are, or if there are any rules. And therefore, it's the Wild Wild West. And
yes.
And so I would like to know what the rules are. And I think there's got to be accountability on both sides. I mean, we're coming up with $20.1 million to share with our athletes beginning this year. That puts a lot of stress not only on our athletic department, but our university and our donors. You know, unfortunately, that's the people that are paying the bill. It's the private people, the donors. And if you look at Texas Tech, the reason why they've had this quick rise is because they have a donor whose wife is very interested in softball, and that's kind of the way it works. But unfortunately, I've watched you know, some good programs with some good people lose some good people for absolutely no reason. They've got nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
And to me, that's kind of sad. If a kid wants to transfer, then great. But you know what? If I put in my $50,000 in your development, then I should be able to get something back in return.
Absolutely. Even if it's only half, because they gave you gave them whatever that would be. And I think you hit it on the head, because not only is it just the donors, what I think people don't realize yet, which they're going to, is you very rapidly could push out the 9 to 5 blue collar workers, because there's going to be a trickle down effect to the cost of going to the event. The money has to come from somewhere. It just doesn't get printed like Monopoly money, you know?
Right.
So a $20 ticket to go to a softball game all of a sudden could be $100. You know, now you start making it to where now they're just going to sit at home and watch it. They'll let the advertisers pay for it. And I think that's something that concerns me for sure.
And Carrie, we already have that. I mean, we've already arrived to that point where now we have a competitive fee attached to every ticket. You know, and whether you're buying a softball ticket or you're buying a football ticket, you're getting, you're going to have to be a part of the problem, you know?
Yeah, part of the problem, or what they're thinking is part of the solution. At some
Right?
point, it becomes part of the problem. So, absolutely. I want to switch into more important things in my
Yeah.
mind. I really want to talk to you and pick your brain as the mastermind behind hitting the Arizona way, all of
Mm.
that kind of stuff. Your approach to hitting and development over the years, how did it change? You may be noticing that Katie Lively is not on the podcast with us. She is transitioning into a different position and more into communications within the company. She will appear as a guest occasionally throughout of it all, but I'm really sad she missed this one because Mike Candrea is a legend, and I am just so thrilled to be able to have that chance. I am going to encourage you to make sure you spread the news about this podcast, like, follow, share away. If you would like Extra Innings Softball to continue bringing you such great guests as the Mike Candreas and more to come. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think anytime you're in a profession for 40 years, hopefully there's going to be change because there needs to be change. I mean, if you look at Major League Baseball, it looks different and it's managed different today than it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So that's progress in some sense. And so I think if you look at what has changed for me, I always go back and say, basically I was teaching the same things, but I had a different verbiage. And I had a different way to communicate what I was trying to get people to do. And because of video, I could actually see what, if I was teaching, if that's exactly what people were doing.
Ah,
So it was more of a confirmation of, am I teaching it because it worked for me and because that's the way I was taught? Or is it because I have this foundation that I can show you 100,000 hitters that are doing the same thing?
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I'm not teaching style. I'm teaching, something that's substance.
So my question to you is, obviously any university or any coach at a university is
Mhm.
really only as good as the athletes they get. Obviously, we can go through a plethora of the
Yeah.
athletes. Probably my all-time favorite of yours is Leah Miko because she's one of my dear friends.
Yeah.
So even though she played at Arizona, I told her I forgave her. Anyways, with that being said, what made Arizona such a consistent offensive threat, or that you were even able to get those hitters to always want to be there, in your opinion?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head right now. It starts with athletes. And so I was blessed to be able to bring in some very good athletes that had a passion for the game, that had the work ethic to meet the challenges of the game. And really, I was smart enough to let them play the game. I think right now that's one thing I see is a lot of athleticism being stifled because
Amen.
kids are looking at numbers all the time, and not just learning how to play the game by feel. And if you
Yes.
look at Aaliyah Miko, she, you mentioned her, she not the prettiest swing in the world, but I tell you what, it worked.
You don't fix what's not broken.
Exactly. And so I think the athlete part is a big part of it because I think great athletes want to be surrounded by great athletes. So, you get a handful of them and then they bring in others. And next thing you know, you've got the ball rolling. I look at Oklahoma right now and that's a big part of their program is the recruitment.
Mhm.
Patty's done a really nice job of bringing in some really good people that 20 years ago wouldn't have left California,
Absolutely.
that now,
Certainly not to be a Sooner.
not to be a Sooner, exactly, but now they are, and those kids are recruiting other kids. Your best recruiters are your kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, well, you bring up something for me that is my biggest pet peeve that I've constantly tried to push into my own kid is there's a lot of paralysis by analysis. And there is an awful, and it's the reason that I probably stayed coaching my daughter up until this last year as much as I could, is I didn't want her to be told how to play the game.
Mhm.
I wanted to talk and teach and how to play the game in practice. And then I wanted everyone out of her way. At 11, I said, call your own game. I'm not calling your game, call it. Now, if you ever want to look over and go like, I'm 11, I have no clue. What do you think? I'll give you some suggestions, but I want you to do it. Seeing these things, arm
Sure.
guards and numbers and stuff, I just am like, that's the reason the clock came in, all these different things. So I've always wanted to. And I think, obviously I'm her mom, so I think she's a good athlete, but I think the thing that separated her and put her to where she got the opportunities that she got was the fact that her softball IQ was so high because she sat in the dugout when I was coaching and she heard the things that I was saying, and I made her play against the college kids when she was really young. And, so she had an advantage. But if I could change anything and wave that wand, it would be get rid of all the electronics and get rid of all that stuff on the field during a game. Like, let's play. Let's go back to the old signals where you could sit there and truly pick them up. Now I sit there and I pick up the numbers. And she's like, how'd you get that? I'm like, they're not using different numbers. Look. So I mean, there's different things like that I think is what makes our game so special.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about the mental approach to hitting. And
Yeah.
I'm doing this selfishly because I would love to make my daughter sit down and listen to this, because
Well,
I want to hear from you what you think makes an elite hitter from the mental approach.
I think the first thing is you don't have to go any further than their work ethic, because to be a good hitter, you have to have a passion for hitting. And so you've got to want to be able to do the reps that it takes to be able to make it an automatic move when you walk up there and you're not thinking. So I always look at, great golfers and great hitters, and there's definitely has to be a passion somewhere along the line that they just love. They love working at the game.
Yeah.
And they love working at the game, but they also know how to handle failure. I think at the end of the day, I mean, I look at golf today and I think about golf being a game of recovery. I never ever thought of it that way, but that's what it is, because everyone is going to make mistakes. And I think in hitting, it's the same thing. What can you control? You can control being on time. You can control having a plan, but that plan's got to begin in the dugout. It can't begin in the batter's box, but and then at the end of the day, you got to have short-term memory. You've got to be able to just kind of stay where your feet are all the time.
Absolutely.
And not put so much pressure on yourself. So
I like that.
You start playing the number game, and that's when you get in trouble. It's, when I play golf and I'm going, geez, if I just par out, I'm going to shoot a 76. The minute I think about that, here comes the double bogey,
Is that not the truth? I mean, our brain is so powerful. It can talk you into anything, good or bad.
Right.
I mean, I think you've hit it completely on the head. And I keep telling my daughter all those things. And I can remember the day when she was 11, and I can remember literally being the one saying, hey, let's go hit, let's go do all these things. And I finally looked at her at the end of the season. I said, here's the deal. I'd rather you play golf. I will go out and buy you the most expensive golf. I want to sit in the clubhouse. So if this is something you want to do, then you're going to have to meet your dad and I's checkbook with your passion.
Right.
And I will go work corners for you if I have to make that happen. But done are the days I'm going to ask you to hit or do all these things. And you can play softball socially. I'm perfectly fine with that. Quite frankly, sometimes I might be retired by now if that was the case. So with that being said, I said, I want you to take 2-3 weeks completely off. And then at the end of it, we're going to sit down as a family and decide, are we all in? And this is what you want. This isn't what I want.
Mm-hmm.
This is what you want. We'll go, well, sadly for me, I rue the day I asked that because my arm's about ready to fall off. And I'm like, I don't know if I can pitch to you anymore. Like, you need to go be Courtney's issue. That's not my problem anymore. That's the thing that I love, because the thing that I've seen, and I pitched and all that stuff. I was hitter. Yeah, I didn't do much of that. But that's the thing that I've loved about her, is that's what she's gotten like obsessed with. Yeah. She comes in and she's like, hey, have you seen this? You hit stuff. I want this. And what is it? And I'm sitting down. I'm like, oh, here's another $1,500. Go do this. And, and she's like, hey, I need to go to Providence, Rhode Island. They're going to do this motor preference thing with me, hook me all up to tell me what kind of a mover I am. And I want to know those things because I'm doing all these drills that I see, but that might not even match what I'm doing. Right. I want to know. Right. And my husband looked and he said, she better marry well, because this is ridiculous. So I totally get it. So, all right, let's transition into another segment. This is the golden nugget error for recruits and parents that I just want to kind of pick your mind. I have my thoughts, but I'd love to hear what you say. You've got this class of 2027 coming up for the infamous September 1st date that they all sit around like with their nails like a cat hanging on a screen. And I'm like, look, it's just one day and it's just the beginning. It's not like the end all be all. Quit watching social media, what other people are posting. Right. What do you think, if you were talking to your daughter or to athletes that maybe you were recruiting to advise, what do you think should be the most important thing that matters to an athlete when picking a school?
Well, I think there's lots of things. I think falling in love with the school is probably most important, because the people are going to change. And so I think a lot of times when you're recruiting, you roll out the red carpet and you're playing for a particular coach, but that coach could be gone tomorrow. So I think the academic offerings, does it fit what I really want to do in life? Because unfortunately, softball is going to come to an end, and everyone's going to be doing something other than playing softball. That's a true statement, and
Amen.
very few of us are going to
Preach,
make a living playing
preach.
softball. So make sure you're going somewhere that's going to prepare you for life after softball. And so
Yes.
whether that's the substance, the people, the experience, whatever it may be, I think you've got to look at everything. And you can play softball in a million different places, and it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. Yes, if I'm a very competitive kid, I want to play on a competitive program, and that's got to be a part of the process. Am I going to a program where I'm going to be developed, or am I going to be the same person when I leave there? I think that's got to be important for some people. And for others, I think I've seen it is recruiting good players bring in good players. And so you've got to be careful that you're not going there for a particular reason, and that is the people, because people can change.
I love
We're in
that.
an era right now where there is absolutely no loyalty.
Mm,
So people are not they're not chasing universities, they're chasing a bag of money in my eyes. And
yeah.
that's the sad part that I don't like. So I'm hoping if I had any influence on a kid, they would look at the whole picture, the whole experience. And, to me, I think that's so important, because the one thing that some of these kids are missing when they're transferring 2 and 3 times is they will never have that alumni base to draw from for the rest of their life. And
Absolutely.
when you're there, when you're 18, 19, 20-year old, you might think that this is life-changing money, but it really isn't. But what's going to change your life is having that network in your back pocket for the rest of your life, and it's hard to get people to understand that.
Absolutely. When we opened up Pandora's box, that was the first thing that went. I
Yeah,
agree 100%. So now this is geared more towards the parents. And this
yeah.
is, I think, I keep telling myself I just need to open up common sense 101 for parenting, would probably make a lot of money and I could just sit at home and do that. What do you think, or what would you advise a parent to be focused on? And
Mhm.
what would you tell them to let go of? Those are the two things that I like to talk to parents about, because it is their daughter's
Right.
journey. They're the bookends on both sides of that.
Well, I think they need to focus on the substance, on what's going to allow their child to be developed physically, mentally, and emotionally. I mean, as a person, as an athlete, but the whole picture. And what they need to let go of, I think, for many, is that they're not the ones being recruited. It's the athlete. And so try to step aside and be a listener more than being in the middle of the recruiting process, because that's one thing that turned me off when I would sit in my office with parents and a kid, and the parents were doing all the talking.
Mm,
I was starting to wondering, who am I recruiting here?
absolutely.
And so I think that's kind of a red flag that could spiral into other things as you start coaching that kid. So I think for parents, you love your kid unconditionally. And so you want to be able to sit back and enjoy this great moment in their life, to not have to coach them, to give them to someone else and let them get out of the bubble and grow a little bit, but to be there when they fall, you're there to pick them up. You're
Yeah,
there to support them. And so I think
absolutely.
that's so important. I mean, you talk about the mental game. One of the toughest things mentally with athletes today is they get in the car and they have to rehash the whole game for mom and dad. And that's not a healthy thing.
No, absolutely not. That's the one thing that I keep saying to the young kids that I'm giving lessons and stuff to their parents. I'm like, whether they do good or they do bad, the very first thing they should hear from you is, I just love watching you play.
Yep.
And I said, and you can learn that from the grandparents. Grandparents don't care if little Susie drops a ball or she makes the game-winning play. Everything she does is incredible.
Right.
And I think that's probably, if I could ask God to do anything in switching it, I would like switch that mentality from the grandparents to the parents. Is get just so where they
Yep.
love watching them play. And the one thing that I said to my daughter the other day, and I actually made her cry saying this, which I thought, dang, I didn't mean to do that, but I think it must have come directly from God. As I said, do you realize you've already played softball longer than what you have left in your career?
Yeah.
And she just looked at me and she goes, I don't want to hear that. I'm like, well, maybe you need to, because it might help you keep things in perspective. And I said, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can be a Leah Miko and you can play into your 30s with Olympics and all that stuff. So maybe you can look back and say, You lied, Mom. And I hope that that's your dream. I hope that happens. But I said, if you keep that in perspective, then you'll realize it truly was a game. And that's really all it is. And it's a game that should and will prepare you for life. So
That
I agree 100%.
that is so true. In fact, I do the same thing with life. In fact, one day I was sitting there, and my dad had passed away at 77 years old, and I had this tape measure in my hand, and I pulled out 77 inches. Then I took away the 69 that I was, and I'm going, that's what I got left.
Yes.
When you
Oh gosh,
start
what a
looking at your
visual.
experiences that way, you tend to stay present and you tend to enjoy the moment. So I think for parents, that's one thing I would love for them to do is enjoy the moment, because it's a short time that they're going to be an athlete.
Absolutely. Well, and you say that when they get in the car. I literally looked at this one father about a month ago. I'm giving a lesson. I'm like, you're paying me an obscene amount of money to work with your kid right now, which gives me my money to get my kid where they want to be. But so it's just a travel, like an exchange. But he just kept going on. And every time I'd say something, you could hear her doing this and listening to what he was saying. And I finally just said, look, I said, I don't think I should work with your daughter anymore, because this is a conflict of interest. She's trying to please you. She can't hear me.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, and I just want to say something, and I'm doing this out of respect. And I said, don't hear something I'm not saying. But I said, how do you think you would feel if he's a CEO of a company, makes a ton of money. I said, if I showed up to your work and sat right there at your desk and said, answer the call, do this, you're not doing this. Hey, this person needs this. I said, what do you think you'd do? And he kind of looked at me and he just said, I've never thought about that. I said, you couldn't perform. You can't do it. You can't do it. And I'm like, and one thing you better know about your daughter is she's a pleaser.
Mm-hmm.
And she's going to do anything and everything to please you. And she's going to fail miserably because she can't.
What most kids are.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So what do you think separates these recruits or college athletes that hit the ground running? And I have a feeling I know some of the things you're going to say, but I want the hearings to say, compared to the ones who struggle in college. You see these phenoms that show up at college and they're like a candle that's been blown out.
Well, I think some of the things we've been talking about is the way they were handled. First of all, I think the tough-nosed kid is usually a kid that comes from very little and has kind of earned their way, has played the game because they love the game, not because mom and dad love the game,
Mhm.
And so I think there's a lot of different things that go into it. But at the end of the day, you can't fake passion and you can't fake work ethic. And I think the kid that does well early in college probably they have a bigger database, number one. So they played the game for a long time. They have the experiences that you need. They understand pressure. They understand failure, so they're much more prepared versus the kid that's been put on a pedestal their entire life, maybe hasn't played at the level that they're going to get ready to play at, and they're
Absolutely.
going to struggle.
Yes.
So I think experiences have a lot to do with it. I think the way you're brought up, there's something about discipline that I don't care whatever aspect of life you're in, you can always tell the kid that has been brought up with some discipline,
Absolutely.
by the way they act, the way they react. And to me, that was so important. I'd go out and recruit kids, and I would really look for, when things got bad, how did they react to it?
Yeah.
Was this kid going to strike out and just go in the dugout and throw their bat down and go to the end of the dugout? Or were they going to be a teammate? Were they going to get back into the game and respond? And so, I always go back to my Olympic days, and I think that if there's one thing that those kids all were, they were great athletes, but they were all great teammates because they understood they were only going to go as far as the people that had on their right and their left.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
And so I think the young kid sometimes thinks that they've done it on their own, where the kid that's had the trials and tribulations has had to rely on others to help them
Absolutely.
get what they want. And
I
it
love
makes a
that.
difference.
I love that. All right, let's just segment way to the closing that all the things that everyone wants to know about Coach Candrea.
Ooh.
Life after coaching, what's keeping you busy
Great.
now?
Well, life has been really good. I mean, there's one thing about coaching as a profession that, there's a lot of good that comes with it. I loved what I did, but there was a lot of things that I weren't able to do. And one of it's family. Believe it or not, you give up a lot when you're coaching others. I always said I spent more time with other people's kids than my own.
Mhm.
And so retirement has been really good in that regard, to be able to spend time with the grandkids and watch them, to spend time with my wife and enjoy life, and just to get back to a simpler life, where my nose wasn't always in my planner. Although I am a planner. I always will be.
I know you got a tea time,
But
so
now
we
I
got
gotta plan tea times instead of, yeah.
yeah. So do we have any granddaughters?
We have one granddaughter, and we have another one on its way. So we have a 1-year-old, and then we have one that's gonna be born in November.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. And then we have 3 grandsons,
That's crazy.
ranging from, um, 19 years old to,
Wow.
yeah, to
Wow.
3. Yeah.
So I'm assuming I'm gonna see you in the traveling softball coaching era out there
Oh, no,
coaching
I
new
don't I don't know.
you're gonna be
Right.
smart and buy them golf clubs.
Exactly. Exactly. No, life's been good, and I still got my foot in the door. I got one foot in, one foot out at Arizona. I still love what I do. I love helping coaches. So I'm mentoring a lot of our head coaches right now, which has been great. Sport administrator for softball and advising the athletic director, who is a new one, and I think one that has done a really nice job of cultivating the culture that we need right now in this day and age. It's so different as an AD what the needs really are,
Absolutely, and it changes daily for sure.
and it's a challenge.
All right, here comes the hot seat, and then we're done. One game you'll never forget from your coaching career.
Well, one game,
It's hard to
well,
do when you have 8 national championships, but
one thing about coaching is you never want to single out an athlete or a game, because there's so many that you're a part of their life forever, and that's the great part about coaching. Is I get to share with all of my former players, their families, and their experiences, and many of them now having kids that are playing softball, right?
yeah,
And so I've
absolutely.
kind of outlived that. But I don't know. It would be hard to say that probably the 2004 Olympic gold medal game was probably a pretty special moment
Yeah,
for a lot of reasons.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Is there a one coach, and it can be in any sport, that you admire the most or consider a mentor or try to model yourself after?
Well, there's probably many. One thing I learned about coaching is that I'm going to be a piece of a lot of different people.
Mm.
And so I loved going to coaching clinics. I love speaking to coaches. But what I realized is I took pieces from different coaches. So for me to say one person would be very tough. Although if there's one guy that kind of sits in the forefront of my life, it's probably Dick Tomey,
Ah,
former football coach here. Just a down to earth, competitive, wonderful human being that could keep the game in perspective and share it in his athletes' lives the way I think it should be.
I love that.
Yeah,
Absolutely love that, and I
I,
think
I think
it's
that
so
would be
true.
him. Yeah.
Yeah, so true, and I love that I always tell people, I'm like, any drill, anything I'm ever doing, any decision I ever made as coach, I used to say stealing from other people. Now I
Oh,
say that's not politically correct, I borrowed, and then I would give
exactly.
it back. So,
Right.
absolutely. Did you have a favorite road trip that you always took during the season?
Well, I had
Other
some
than
really,
Oklahoma City?
yeah, that was my favorite place to go. But I don't know why, but I always enjoyed going to Oregon.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird, because I guess it's because when you live in the desert, and then
Oh,
you go
yeah.
up and you see all the green
Yeah,
and the
you're not used
water.
to anything green.
Yeah, but I always enjoyed going there, and I can't say that I really enjoyed playing there
Yeah.
because the weather was always miserable.
Well, that's
So
really cool.
yeah,
All right, last question, then I'm gonna let you go chase that 74
yeah.
for the day. Do you have any superstitions, or did your team, like a favorite team, have any superstitions that would be fun to share?
Oh my God, you're looking at a guy that was full of superstitions, and they change from year to year.
Yep.
I remember one time at the College World Series. Back then, we were driving vans, so we didn't even have a bus. So we had like 4 vans, and we are going to the field, and they would always follow my van. And then I took the wrong turn, and finally got back on the interstate and got back to the stadium. We won the game. So every day I took the wrong turn. And
Absolutely.
we did that for the entire week. And
You always had to leave earlier.
it always worked. And then I ate at Whataburger. One time I went to Whataburger at the College World Series, and I got my receipt, and it was number 7, which is my lucky number because of Mickey Mantle.
Okay.
And And so every night after the game, I ate at Whataburger, you know. I have some superstitions.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing with us. And I'm going to leave people with this because it's one of my favorite stories about you. And you probably don't even remember this. At a NFCA convention out in Arizona, I was coaching at Virginia with Karen Johns at the time and Brandon Duncan.
Yeah.
And it's probably one of my favorite conventions. I just thought it was an absolute gorgeous place. I did the spa a few days, got to be a girl, all that good stuff. But we were getting ready to go to the Hall of Fame induction. And Brandon Duncan, our young coach, forgot his dress shoes. So here he is. He's got this suit. And I'm like, just wear your tennis shoes. No one will know. You know, I didn't think it was a big deal. He was mortified. I remember running into you. He hadn't come down and I was laughing so hard. You asked me when I was laughing. I told him, I said, he doesn't have any shoes. He won't come. And he's like, what size shoe? You said, what size shoe? I called him. He told me you actually gave him a pair of shoes. So I always tease Brandon to this day whenever we connect. I'm like, so are you still remembering what it was like to walk in Mike Candrea's shoes? So I just thank you, Coach. It's a blessing. I've always admired you from afar. I love all of your athletes. I loved playing third when you were coaching third and our gibber and jabber back and forth. And I wish you all the best. Keep chasing those joys and dreams. Shoot a 74. Tell the wife hi, and make sure you love on those grandbabies.
Same here. So good to see you. Take care of yourself.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Voices from the Field, presented by Extra Innings Softball. Don't forget to follow us on social media, subscribe to us on Spotify, and visit our website at extrainningssoftball.com for more stories, rankings, and updates from around the game. We'll see you guys next week.